Welcome back to The Flow. If you're just joining us, go back and catch part 1 first, because this conversation builds on itself. But if you were with us last time, welcome back. I'm here with Israel Balderas, a 20-year veteran of Washington journalism who covered the Clinton years up close and who now teaches media law and ethics as a professor at Elon University. In part 1, we laid the groundwork. Now we're going to go deeper. This is part 2 of my conversation with Israel Balderas. Let's get into it. Look, both of us are lawyers, and I know that you're hearing in the scuttlebutt, and we're seeing in our professional magazines how many judges are living in fear now.
Yeah.
And so let's get back to talking about, the institutions that we have and trust in the institutions and what kind of damage it does. If the guy that's sitting up there on the bench that is going to make a ruling that's going to affect somebody's life in the back of his head knows that if I rule this way, somebody's going to send a pizza to my house with the name of some murdered kid on it. Sending me a very definite message that my family's at risk. What does that do? I believe that democracy exists not at the point of the gun, but because of the trust that the people give it. We call it rule of law.
Yeah.
That's what we call the rule of law. And that it's funny, my good friend who is the prayer leader down at the mosque locally. He talks about Islam as submission to God, and when I hear him talk about that, what pops up in my mind is that a democracy is a submission to the rule of law, and that we submit ourselves, we submit a piece of our independence, a piece of our sense of I can do whatever I want to this idea that there is this rule of law. But when the guy up there who's making that decision is going to make it under the assumption that we're all going to follow it because we believe in this concept, and he's working under a cloud of threat, and all of our institutions are being criticized and diminished and dismantled, in effect, by the forces that be, so that we start to lose faith in our institutions and therefore our rule of law. And let me kind of go back to your 12-year-old daughter. What does that attack and dismantling of our trust in institutions, what kind of a world does that start to create for her to live into?
I think you put it very well. And I go back to America's motto, right? E pluribus unum.
Uh-huh.
In many, we are one, right?
Uh-huh.
This social contract, this compact that we have,
Yeah,
this rule of law, this understanding, right?
Uh-huh.
That, as James Madison put it, if men were angels, we wouldn't need government. But the problem is that government is no angel, right? Which is why I love what I teach, which is the First Amendment, right? And the First Amendment is there for the very reason you just said. And that is that we as individuals have what we call a negative right, not a positive right. Meaning,
Explain.
It is the First Amendment right, the free speech, freedom of religion, freedom to assemble, right? Freedom to gather, freedom to petition your government for redress. That is a freedom that doesn't come from government. For those who may be on the left, I will say the words, there's this idea of natural law, that these were ideas, these were promises that were given to us. Call it God, call it the universe, call it humanism, but that because we as human beings are thinking individuals yearning to be free, we have the right that no one gave to us. And so therefore, if no one gave it to us, no one can take it away. The government can't take it away. And so for me, when you talk about the idea that institutions whether it's the military, whether it's the courts, whether it's the church, right? These were the things that bound us together. There was a time when we would all gather in the city square. There was a time when we would all go play softball or go to bowling alleys, right? We had community. And so the rule of law is this idea, right, that we are all going to be bound by laws that we believe are just, right? We, the people, in order to form, right, a more perfect union. It's not a perfect union. It's more perfect, meaning we're going to get it wrong. Because we got it wrong in 1776 because we left a lot of people out of that promise, right? But we are going to try and get better with time. And what Donald Trump does is he takes that narrative and he flips it on its head. And he's what I call the chief accuser. He is the chief accuser of all the things that have made this country exceptional. Not perfect, right? Because we do have a history to answer to. Racism, slavery. We need to answer for the sins of our past. But we become better angels over time, as Abraham Lincoln would say. And so for me, what I defend is not so much the institutions, because as a reporter, I know that institutions also often fought for power. A good example of that was the church.
Even journalism as an institution.
I would first say to my peeps, we have done harm, right, in how we cover the truth, how we cover events. We don't call balls and strikes, and we do not call balls and strikes. Why? Because we do not want to go against our tribe. We know the data. We know that more people in the media tend to be on the left side of politics than anything else. It's not even close, right? It's like faculty. It's like university faculty. We know the data that most faculty tend to vote for the Democrats on the left, right? Like I think 85%, 90%. When I was coming up as a journalist, and a lot of people won't know this name. You'll remember it, Bob. But there was this journalist in Washington, D.C. His name was Tim Russert. And for the longest time, Tim Russert.
Tim was kind of like the modern day Walter Cronkite.
Exactly, right?
If you remember, I don't know if you remember Walter Cronkite.
I do, right? Uncle Walter. But Tim Russert was my version of a Walter Cronkite, right? Well, for a generation,
Tim was great.
Walter Cronkite, right? He would say, and that's the way it is, right? That's right. How he would close out his newscast. That's the way it is. So Tim Russert was the moderator of Meet the Press for years and years before his untimely death. And there was this thing in Washington called the Russert Rule. And the Russert Rule was, you don't vote. You don't vote come election day. You don't vote on primary day. You don't vote. As a journalist, by the way, I'm saying it as a journalist. Why? Because if you vote, that means you are voting for a person who believes in what you believe in politically. But how can you call balls and strikes if you're wearing the team jersey underneath the umpire outfit? You can't do it. You cannot do it. And a good example for me was in 2000. In 2000, I could report on the election fiasco that followed Bush v. Gore because I didn't vote for either candidate. I could call balls. I can call strikes. I could look at what was happening in Florida. I could look at what was happening in the Supreme Court, and I could report the way it is. Many of my colleagues failed that. They failed that, Bob, as recently as 2024, and I saw it personally. How did I see it? I took a group of students out on the campaign trail in January of 2024. You know this. We have a winter term at Elon University, and the winter term is the 3 weeks in January. And so we have this program called Study USA, and I had put together a Study USA program where I wanted to duplicate what I had done covering presidential candidates. And so I took students to South Carolina for a week and a half, and then I took students to New Hampshire, thinking that 2024 was going to be an open election, right? And we were going to have Democrat candidates and we were going to have Republican candidates. And then therefore we could follow these candidates in these primary states. South Carolina, first in the nation for the Democratic Party. New Hampshire, first in the nation for the Republican Party. But what happened was that President Joe Biden went against his word, went against his promise, and he was a despot. He decided to stay in power for his own ego, despite the fact that we knew that his age limited him for another term. We knew that. We could see it coming. So as a teacher, I took my students to see Joe Biden, and it just so happened that Joe Biden launched his 2024 campaign at Mother Emanuel AME in Charleston, South Carolina. For those who know their history, know that Mother Emanuel AME was a tragedy of a terrible terrorist attack by a white nationalist, white supremacist who went into the church and murdered several people. Joe Biden had went after the attack at Mother Emanuel. He went there afterwards, and he personally gave the telephone number to all the families who had lost loved ones. People at the church knew Joe Biden personally because he had reached out to them after the tragedy of Mother Emanuel AME. So he decided to launch his 2024 campaign at Mother Emanuel AME. That was January 5th, 6th, you can correct me on the date, of 2024. That was his launch. So I took my students. We were there, actually, in the field. And we went and we sat in the back of Mother Emanuel AME. And I can tell you that I personally saw Joe Biden walk up the stairs to the church pulpit with help. He could barely walk up to that podium. And the media was standing right next to me on the left. And I said to myself, excuse me, why aren't you reporting that the guy who's about to launch his 2024 campaign can barely get to the podium? And more importantly, and I left this out, we had gone to church on that Sunday. He launched on a Monday. We went to church services on Sunday because I told my students, if you want to understand why Joe Biden is launching his campaign here tomorrow, you need to go talk to the church people. And I can tell you, people who love Joe Biden, they were angry that he was launching a second bid to the White House. They said he shouldn't be running. These were people who liked him. And they could tell you why he shouldn't be there. And they were upset that he was using their church for his campaign. So the African American community who had voted for him in 2020 in South Carolina said he shouldn't run. My students could see that Joe Biden's age said he shouldn't run. And what did my kin in the journalism business do? Did they report the facts? Did they hold him accountable? Did they hold the White House accountable because they knew he wasn't holding press conferences, he wasn't holding interviews because he was too old? And it wasn't until a very few people, Ezra Klein of the New York Times was the first one in March of 2024, who said Joe Biden needs to step down. And even then, Bob, the Democratic Party was saying, nope, nope, nope. And it wasn't until June when he debated Donald Trump. For whatever reason, Joe Biden decided to debate Donald Trump in the month of June. That normally doesn't happen until September or October. And everybody got to see, oh my goodness, Joe Biden, God forbid he dies tomorrow. And then that's when he decided to step down, and that's when Kamala Harris took over. But by that time, the White House had lost the narrative. And I blame, and I'm telling you because I've said this on the record, I blame Donald Trump in the White House today. I blame it on the media in 2024 because they didn't do their job in holding Joe Biden accountable. And that's why I say to you, you're right. We're losing faith in our institutions. We're losing faith in journalism. We're losing faith in the military. We're losing faith in the church because people don't do what they're supposed to do ethically. Report the truth, right? Report the truth, no matter the consequences. But my former colleagues, they said, if we report the truth about Joe Biden's health, that's going to benefit Donald Trump. God forbid we do something that benefits Donald Trump. So therefore, we are going to be consequentialist instead of Kantians. Instead of reporting the truth, no matter what, give people the information, let them decide. That's our role. But we didn't call balls and strikes in 2024.
I know. And that certainly is an unfortunate thing, but You know what you're talking about ultimately comes down to the same thing, that our ethical disciplinary rules and I can't remember what the other one, the aspirations that we have. There's always this distance between, what we know is wrong and what we aspire to, and then somewhere in between being completely wrong and not achieving our aspirations, we land somewhere in the middle of that. I often think that the very people that wrote the Declaration of Independence, that said that all people, all men, not women, of course, but it was all men, are created equal, were slave owners. But they, as you said, they wrote the words "a more perfect union." And so, we have the aspiration of what we want the country to be, and we have where we actually are. And between those two things is a struggle, and forces come to bear. Some forces want to keep us where we at, or even push us back to another time that we'd already crossed some of the thresholds that we needed to cross. Others want to push us forward too fast. But it is the struggle, I think, between who we are and where we are and what we aspire to be that actually defines the story of America.
Yeah, I agree. I think the story of America is the story of, fits and trials, of good and bad, of light and darkness.
Mm-hmm.
I think, where we started was this idea of where we are today, technology wise, right?
Mm-hmm.
And with the rise of AI and
Right.
what challenge that will be for us as humans, right? And what I do is I don't look to politics as a solution, but I do look at politics as a sort of a gauge. Where are we? And I look, for example, at Texas, where you have Tellerico, who is the Democrat candidate running against Ken Paxton in Texas for the U.S. Senate race. Or I look at Senator Ossoff in Georgia. He's a Democrat. Ralph Warnock, again, another Democrat senator there in Georgia, both red states. Two Democrat senators represent Georgia as a red state. James Tellerico, no Democrat has, won as a U.S. senator, I think, in 32 years. And yet, he's right now leading the polls. And what do those three individuals have in common? They are very comfortable.
Character
is downstream from the spiritual aspect of what they believe in.
Mm-hmm.
If you listen to Tellerico, he's very
Mm-hmm.
comfortable talking about the spiritual. He's very comfortable talking about the metaphysical aspects of who we are, right? That we are both body, we're mind, we're spirit. Ralph Warnock, he's a preacher.
Yeah, right.
And John Ossoff, who's Jewish, go listen to his sermons. And he talks about the gospel and what does it mean, right, to be a follower of Christ, not a Christian. There's a huge difference between being a Christian and being a follower of Christ. I would certainly tell a lot of people, I do not believe that many Christians or many people who call themselves Christians are followers of Christ, not in 2026 and not in America. But if you look at those three individuals, they are comfortable speaking about the spiritualness of our lives. They are comfortable talking about morality. What does it mean to love your neighbor? What does it mean, right? In walking in the fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, gentleness, kindness, self-control. Oh my God, if we just had self-control in the White House today, imagine what that would, what
emotional regulation would be nice as well.
And so for me,
but
what I
just let me say that one of the things that when we talk about ethics, because of course ethics is a part of my course, one of the things that I try to impress upon them is that when you come to the top of the exit of the thruway and there's a guy out there begging for money, You got the old meme of the devil's on one side and the angel's on the other side, and the devil's saying, "Oh, he's probably going to use it for drugs and money, and he's just scamming you. Don't support that and don't entitle him, blah blah blah." The other side saying, "Yeah, but he might have kids who are starving. You don't want them to starve." And so you have this conflict of wanting to help, but then not wanting to enable. And if you take that same internal struggle that we have, and you come out into your family, usually the question always is, the struggle's the same. It's, I don't want to enable the kid, I don't want to entitle the kid, but at the same time, I don't want him to feel deprived. I want to give him what he wants and make him happy, but I don't want blah, blah. And then if you take it out of the family into the community, it kind of gets organized into some of those tribes. I want to tell you just one little thing about the Republicans, because there once was a time, and many of the young ones don't remember it, but they actually spoke. And I will tell you, and I make no bones about it, I'm a tree-hugging, kumbaya liberal. And I always had loved the Republican Party because I knew that they were fiscally conservative and they would be concerned about the money. And they would be looking at it because I knew they had good hearts. I knew that they concerned about human suffering, but they were also concerned about not going broke. So I was free, totally free to not worry about the money and just want to give everything away. And they didn't have to worry about the safety net because they knew that I was out there trying to sew that safety net together. And together we worked it out. We could trust each other. We could work it out because we each wanted to go to the same place. We just had different priorities in getting there. And I think that the problem today that we have is that we no longer all want to get to the same place. The idea of America being great, in my mind, is a very different world than it is in the other side's mind of a white male dominated, type of life. So I've come up with 3 rules for trying to pick here are my 3 rules for choosing a candidate.
Okay.
First rule: what is the world that this person wants to create, and would I be happy living in it? Number 2, is this person speaking to my better angels or my fears? And number 3, is this person inclusive or exclusive? But on top of that, the first question is are they competent? Because none of it matters if they're not competent. So those are my 3 rules. And I guess I think that they say a lot more about, when you make those decisions, it says a lot more about who you are than who the candidate is.
Yeah.
And you're a Kantian, and I kind of know how you would choose that. I kind of have a feeling that I know what the world is that you would want to live in, because it's the same world you want your 12-year-old daughter to live in.
I think for me, and people should know, you invited me here because you saw a video, I think, I had posted a video on Facebook about this topic, and you were like, "Man, let's talk about that. That's really good." And the topic was, I was down in Texas. I was visiting family, and as a journalist, right, I'm talking to people like, "What do you like about Tellerico?" And people were saying, "Oh my God, we love Tellerico because of his moral position, right? He's not afraid to talk about the spiritual aspects, the beliefs, the Bible." And at the same time, I said, "Okay, but if you care about the morality of a candidate, then please explain to me Graham Plattner in Maine." Because it was at the same time that this was happening with Graham Plattner and James Tellerico that people were saying, on the one hand, we care about the morality of the candidate. But in Maine, they were like, but we can ignore the morality of this candidate. And I said,
well, wait, Israel, but they 2 things can be true. On the one hand, I can admire the morality, and on the other hand, I can be sucked in by not wanting to lose.
But that's why the Democrats lost in 2024. That's why the Democrats. That's why
nobody's perfect.
But it's not about being perfect. It's about being consistent. It's about principles, right? Because principles, you don't move those principles. And there was a time when we would ask about our candidates, does this candidate hold the beliefs that I have, that I am happy to pass on to my children, right? Because we used to have this idea of what is at our core, right? You and I remember,
agree with you.
can I have a beer with this person? Okay.
Yeah, no, but I understand what you're saying, but it's just what's good for the goose is good for the gander. I mean, there's a guy now that the Republicans ought to be relieving.
For sure.
What's his name? And they say that he broke his kid's
Max
collarbone.
Miller.
I don't know
Max
if that's
Miller
true.
of Ohio is a good example. That's a congressman whose father-in-law is Senator Moreno, of Ohio, and his wife was the recipient of Max Miller's wrath. 100%. But let me say something that my grandfather said: 2 wrongs don't make a right.
Yeah,
and either we believe, we either listen. People are hungry. You just said it, Bob. Where are we going? Where are we going in this country? And I would say this: we are going in this country the way we have gone in the past, and that is, we have a guiding principle, we have a guiding light. It's not perfect, but at least it points us in the right direction, in one direction. And the idea that people say, well, we're just going to do the same as Donald Trump. I'm sorry, we all at least could say Donald Trump is quite authoritarian light, or at least authoritarian adjacent. He is contrary to all the principles that we believe in this country. And thank God for the founding fathers that they put these concepts of separation of power, right? And checks and balances, because they're working, because our founding fathers in the Federalist Papers said, what will we do when you have a king-like individual? They didn't think it would be, right?
Yeah.
It did.
Right. No, I suppose that one of the things that happens, and we're all human, this is what happens, is that when you have this constant barrage of corruption, that it almost becomes normalized. When you see it happen on the other side, where it's not normalized, it sticks out and you really get pissed off about it, because it almost takes the emphasis and the attention off of what's going on over here. And so it's almost more pissworthy that this guy in Maine was doing what he was doing and that he was supported. It's almost pissworthy because it stands that party up in an equivalence, when if they were more consistent, this normalization over here would stand out more, and I get that.
But that's turtles all the way down, right? That's we are defining deviancy down, when the idea is no, right? Let's appeal to our better angels, and that's why I say I go back to Tallarico and Ossoff and Warnock in Georgia, because there was a time when the Democratic Party was very uncomfortable talking about religion, right? Bill Clinton was the last person who could go to an African-American church and quote the Bible. But after that, people were, especially on the left, were more comfortable with the secular versus the spiritual. But what is going on in the Democratic Party? That more and more people are comfortable with not just speaking the spiritual aspect of our lives, but seeking it. Because I think the way the Democratic Party wins is not by saying we're going to go mano a mano against Donald Trump, because what he does is he says, you see, everybody's doing it. Everybody's a hypocrite, right? That's the same line he used in 2016 against Hillary Clinton, right? Hey, absolutely, right? You game the system. How do I know? Because they've gamed the system, because I've gamed the system.
Right.
And now
Michelle Obama was basically saying, when they go low, we go high. But, I don't know how much trial law you do, but a lot of people ask me, how can I represent, child molesters and like, and I've represented my good share of murderers and child collectors and some of the most heinous people on earth that you could possibly manage, doing some things that, just defy imagination. People ask me, how can you represent them? And I jokingly, the real reason is the one that you mentioned before, about the fact that my ethics are that. And not only that, but my job is to enforce the Constitution and make sure that the state doesn't take shortcuts.
Right.
So I'm going to enforce everything that I can to keep them honest, because, power corrupts.
We were talking about, does the Democratic Party want to go out into the electorate and make the argument to the people that we have found our own Trump? And I would say to them, that's not the way forward. The way forward,
No, that's not the way
forward is not that. And a good example of that is, look at Michigan, right? You have Abdul El-Sayed, who just won the primary in Michigan against Congresswoman Stevens, who was a moderate. Now, El-Sayed, and let me use these doctors, so let me use this Dr. El-Sayed. He's not a democratic socialist, but he's certainly progressive, and he has progressive ideas, right? Medicare for all is a good example of that. But, right before the primary, which was a week ago, he was on stage with another podcaster. His name is Hassan Piker. And if you know anything about Hassan Piker, you know that he's not just controversial because he's in the manosphere. He has said some horrible things about 9/11 in our country. He has said horrible things about October 7th and the attack on Israel by Hamas, a terrorist organization. And the idea that Dr. El-Sayed was on stage with Hassan Piker, right? Is that who you want to be associated with? Because people are saying, look, if you're associated with those kinds of people because they represent the manosphere, then we need to show the manosphere, the young men in their 20s, that is not how you talk about women. That is not how you talk about a group of people. That is not how you talk about one of the most horrible terrorist attacks in our country. And I was there. I was at the Pentagon on 9/11 when this happened. I reported from the Pentagon on 9/11. And that is still a very sore subject for me. So what I'm saying, and what my thesis is, the Democratic Party will win, and will win on ideas, because we have a better plan on how to move our country forward in a better way. And I think that is why Ossoff is doing great in Georgia. That's why I think Warnock is doing great. 2 Democrats, 2 progressives, not moderates, in a deep red state, Bob. And when you look at why is it that the Republicans are voting for 2 Democrats, is because they have a North Star. They talk about their better angels. They talk about policy to help your neighbor, right? Because we all need care for one another. And so these are the principles that I think are going to help the party.
We have to be meticulous and consistent and not put up with any bullshit.
And that's what my argument is, don't try to out-Trump Trump, because there is no way you can do that. You can't.
Like Michelle Obama said, when they go low, we go high. Right. And we just got to keep that up. We've got to, Gandhi said, no dictator has ever maintained their power forever. Never. It has never happened. And I'll tell you one other story. I went to see a great spiritual teacher once, and he was talking about all of the things like love and generosity and gratitude and all of the wonderful, aspects, that the masters have all taught throughout time. And I had to raise my hand and I said, teacher, for the last 4,000 years, people have been teaching what you're teaching right now. And they've always been followed by a small band of followers while the rest of the world is running around with torches and swords. Why do I think it's going to be any different? And he looked at me and he said, irrelevant question. And everybody cracked up laughing. I said, why is it irrelevant? And he said, it's irrelevant because you seem like a nice man and you seem like you want a better world. No matter what I say, are you going to wake up tomorrow morning and act any differently? I said, well, no. He said, so it's an irrelevant question. And then when everybody quieted down, he says, no, I'm going to tell you the answer to your question. I'm going to answer your question. Why? He said, because you never know when the tipping point comes. And that's where your North Star and your better angels and waking up and doing the next right thing. My dad always used to say, you just do the next right thing and the future will take care of itself.
I love that.
Just do the next right thing. You don't have to worry about what's going to happen 2 years down the line. Just you do the next right thing. Everything will take care of itself.
I love that.
And so that's where we are. You're absolutely right. You got me hook, line, and sinker. I was listening to what you were saying, and honestly, I was being in that tribe and being that, kumbaya guy. You start talking about my tribe and that they're doing this and I'm feeling a little bit, but you're damn right. You got to be meticulous. We have to have that North Star, and we can't put up with anything less. Just because standards have been lowered in some parts doesn't mean our standards need to be lowered.
Thank you.
Of you.
I would say that the Constitution, the American Constitution, is built for more moments like this. To me, the Constitution serves as a principle for constraint. It's a constraint on institutions. It's a constraint on the president, and certainly the First Amendment is a constraint. When people argue with me about the terrible aspects of the First Amendment, that people can say whatever they want and it's horrible and it's racist speech, I always say, the First Amendment is anti-democratic. It's not about the majority. It's about the one. And the one, regardless of his speech, I defend the right of an individual to speak his mind in the marketplace of ideas so that he can win or lose, not based on censorship or authoritarianism or whatever the majority says, but on ideas. And so for me, the First Amendment serves as a promise. It's a promise that you, as a person who yearns to be free, you have a right to speak your mind, to worship, to gather, to petition your government for redress. And if you look at the First Amendment, I argue that the First Amendment has served as a restraint on Trump's indicativeness or appeal.
Vindictives.
Trump's appeal to authoritarianism, right? He loves authoritarians. He loves, people who have used their power to harm society. And up till now, the Constitution has served as a restraint. Donald Trump can say, with a wipe of a pen, an executive order, I say now that the 14th Amendment doesn't protect birthright citizenship. And then you have a Supreme Court who says no. An originalist Supreme Court says no. The 14th Amendment, it's what it says, right? You're not an American citizen because of blood. You're an American citizen because of soil. First Amendment, how many times has Donald Trump has said, well, I don't like what they said, so I'm going to sue them. And finally, the media is fighting back against potential lawsuits, and they're winning, and he's not. And so for me, what I really love, whether it's the rule of law that you mentioned, whether it's institutions like the court, what we call Article 3 courts, federal courts, they have served as a check on executive power. They have served as a check on a Congress that has relinquished its legislative authority to the executive branch. Shame on you, Republicans, for letting go of the power of the string, because the guy that's under the authority of Article 2, you like. So for me, I have hope, Bob. I have hope that the institutions are holding, that the courts are holding the president accountable, that the First Amendment serves as a check on power, that individuals can still think for themselves, that you can have a podcast, right? That we don't need big media conglomerate money to post this on social media. You're going to do a great job of posting it across 3 or 4 different platforms. Your viewership and readership, I saw, reaches around the world. You, this one person. And so to me, it's about the one. And if everybody did what Bob does, which is, I have something to say, let me say it without fear, right? Without any remorse, and with principled vindication, then I say America has kept its promise to be a more better, a more perfect nation.
And that's a great place to end it. Just one last thing. Time is crunching in on us. A lot of folks say, you talk about the one. A lot of folks say, yeah, but what can I do? And what I'm left from our conversation is, you can examine yourself and you can sit down and decide, what are your principles? What are your ethics? What would you say? What is one thing that each and every person can do?
Here's what I do every morning. I am 56 years old, Bob. And every morning I wake up and I say, thank you, God. Thank you that I have another day to live. Thank you that I can put my feet on the ground and walk. Thank you that I get the privilege of waking up a 12-year-old girl, right, to go to school. She can go to school. She's a young lady, right? She can get an education. That she doesn't have to wear certain outfits because she's a woman. That in this country, I can still tell my daughter, if you want to be the president of the United States, you can do that. And so I live a life of thankfulness, of gratitude, right? And I live in a country where I can say, excuse me. And for me, that's the key. The key to everybody who's watching is live a life of gratitude, of thankfulness, because we got the lottery. We got to be in this country. The poorest person in America is the richest person in 75% of the world. And so we do live in an amazing country, not a perfect country, but an amazing country. And so you can make a difference in your family, in yourself, in your community. The one thing that I'm telling people now across the board, go join a community. It can be bowling. It could be pickleball. It could be kickball. It could be whatever. But don't stay locked in your house. Put down the phone, put down the AI, because the future of AI is going to mean more and more making us part of the machine. And so the future is about us fighting to be humans, right? In the 80s, my generation fought for the right to party. That's Gen X, right? And I would say to my students now, fight for the right to be human, right? To cry, to love, to be angry, to be happy, to be sad, to be anxious, to be depressed, to be joyful. But the most important thing, it starts with be thankful. Be thankful of who you are, because you are an amazing, beautiful human being. And right now, the fact that we can still breathe and speak our minds, don't take that for granted. Because there is a future, a dystopian future in a multiverse out there where that kind of world may not always
doesn't exist.
Right.
Well, in a great sense of great gratitude, Israel Balderas, professor, attorney, First Amendment advocate, and holder of great principles, I thank you.
And more important, Bob, your friend.
And no, more important, the father of a 12-year-old.
That's true, my friend. Thank you. Thank you for
Thank you so much.
Wonderful conversation.
Sure.